So now we're going to focus on the second chapter, focused on adolescence, chapter 14, cognitive development. And this portion of chapter 14 focuses on what you need for assignment number 4. So first we're going to talk about Piaget's cognitive theory and formal operational thinking, which is his last stage of cognitive development. And this is mental operations on operations, meaning a person can think about the relationship between two statements or propositions. So they can think about thinking. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And so different types of reasoning are hypothetical, thinking about hypothetical statements. And then another type is isolating and combining variables to draw conclusions. So let's take a look at some examples. So premise number 1 is the chair is larger than the book. Premise number 2, the house is larger than the chair. So a conclusion based on those two statements might be, therefore, the house is larger than the book. And a second example is premise number 1, the book is larger than the chair. Premise number 2, the chair is larger than the house. Therefore, the book is larger than the house. And so they both have the same conclusion, but different premises. Opposite conclusions, but based on different premises. Sorry about that. So the first conclusion is the house is larger than the book, and the second one is the book is larger than the house, so the opposite. So then deductive and inductive reasoning. So deductive reasoning goes from a general truth to a specific deduction. For example, water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The water is frozen. So if we know that what temperature water freezes, we can say it must be 32 degrees or colder. So deductions from true general premises are always correct. Inductive reasoning comes from specific instances to a general conclusion. So my dog's water is frozen, so I might induce then that my neighbor's dog water must be frozen too. Inductions from observed specifics are probably, but not certainly, correct. And so the neighbor may have a heated water dish, and so their dog's water may not be frozen. So another component of pre-operational thought is adolescents start to reason like a scientist or consider combinations of variables. That means that they're becoming much more effective in abstract thinking and abilities to make all kinds of possible combinations and isolate causes. And they also become really interested in science fiction and hypothetical worlds. And so has the movie industry lately, focusing on books that have utopias, utopian societies, ideal solutions to problems, like the Divergent series or the Hunger Games. They thought they had a perfect answer to all the issues. And it's really a dystopian society, so the ability to wrestle with problems of a dystopian society, which obviously we wouldn't think that Divergent is ideal or that the Hunger Games are ideal. Formal thinking is not tied to the physical environment, so they can utilize what they already know and consider that information and come to pretty effective conclusions, although it may not be achieved by many adolescents or adults in all areas. probably for adults in areas they're really experienced at, but for areas of thinking where they have little experience, it might take time and training to think formally in that area. Formal operational thinking is required in school in order to do advanced math and science work, and in symbolism in literature and other areas of study. So as they're beginning to become formal operational thinkers, they do make some errors, and some of this is tied to their perceptions in regards to utopian societies and dystopian societies and their interest in that. So they begin to move away from elementary school's perspective of not being so focused on themselves to going back to that. And so they have something Piaget calls adolescent egocentrism. And he says they're become really focused on their own ideas, and he calls this personal fable. So often they feel they're unique in their feelings and beliefs. They feel that parents and adults don't understand, and they believe negative consequences will not happen to them. So if they've had an argument with their friends, for example, they might feel that no one can understand how they feel about that argument because no one else in the world has ever felt this way. Or when it comes to risk-taking, as we talked about in Chapter 13, they're going to believe that if you drive at 95 miles an hour, you'll get in an accident, but they won't because they're such good drivers. There's also a sense of imaginary audience that's part of this egocentrism. And it's a feeling that everyone is watching them, or everyone's interested in the same things they're interested in. So they believe that others analyze their every move and are interested in what they're doing, what they like, how they dress, and they hold unrealistic self-expectations for perfection. And then the third characteristic is idealism. And this is a strict thinking and standard that the adolescent holds others and society to, but not necessarily themselves. And so they see societal and sometimes moral and standards and rules as black and white rather than the reality of shades of gray. And so here's one that I alluded to earlier, and that's metacognitive understanding. And this is the ability to reflect consciously and deliberately on one's own cognitive processes. And so that's called metacognition, thinking about thinking. There are steady improvements in their ability to manage and deploy their mental resources to solve problems and make decisions. And so they're better able to use the scientific reasoning skills, using systematic approaches to design experiments, to pose scientific questions, to analyze those questions and make inferences. And they're also really focused on developing argument skills, constructing and supporting a position. So they're working on providing evidence to support their position, use evidence to refute opposing claims, improving their metacognitive skills through this process, and then plan and evaluate how the plan is going, reflect on the opponent's arguments, and change strategies as needed. So as a parent of an adolescent, adolescents argue a lot, and it can be really tedious and frustrating for the adults, but you can keep in mind that they're improving their cognitive abilities as they form those arguments. So there's also another perspective about cognitive development in adolescence, and this is the dual process theory that states that using rational thinking and intuitive thinking is used to make real decisions in real life. And so there are two different perspectives, and that's where that dual process comes in. There's the analytic perspective, and this is more formal, rational, using abstract thinking. This requires effort, and it's time-consuming and difficult. And then there's the heuristic approach, and this is more informal. It's based on feelings, biases, and past experiences. These decisions can be made quickly. They don't take a lot of effort, and you can use general rules in regards to this, but the problem is that the individual may hold on to their beliefs when they really are not true, and they may seek information to confirm what they already believe, and so that's confirmation bias. So when it comes to taking risks for adolescents, such as making decisions about drugs or alcohol, again, those dual modes come into play, analytic and heuristic. And in social situations, oftentimes those drugs and alcohol have a glamorized image, and heuristic tends to be how, especially if their peers are participating in that kind of activity, they may make decisions based on affect or emotions and their previous experience. And then even though they might be opposed to using alcohol, they might go along with it. So effective interventions is to help them distinguish between their emotions and the planned behavior. They'd already made a decision. They were not going to use alcohol. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the world of work and how it affects adolescents. So there is controversy about the influence of employment in adolescence. Most American adolescents seek paid work at some point. There are really 5 arguments that are raised as a result of this controversy. Long work hours can lead to declines in health and school. There can be benefits, though, if a child has a balanced schedule between school and work. Differences between those who work and those who don't work. There may be some personality differences and motivation differences. Effects of work vary based on group status. For example, if they're a popular child who has lots of friends and they work in the same environment as their friends, it might have different effects than a child who has less friends and it doesn't have as much of a social life. And some jobs provide more benefits than other jobs. So factors influencing what kind of occupation they choose might depend on their personality. If they like to talk to people, maybe they want to go into sales or work as a clerk or work out amongst the public. Whereas if they're more of a quiet person, they might want to just stock shelves instead. Their work values, the types of rewards the person expects to get from work, their gender, and then their family and socioeconomic influences. So a researcher came up with some personality types in regards to occupations that might be selected. And so the first one that he came up with is realistic, and this is Holland. A realistic perspective or personality type enjoys practical hands-on activities. Investigative personality type enjoys science, inquiry, explanation, and discovery. Artistic personality type enjoys independent, creative, and expressive activities. Social interests, they're interested in developing and maintaining a sense of community and solving social problems. Enterprising, this individual or personality type values leadership and leading teams toward defined goals. And then the last of the 6 is conventional, finds value and success in accuracy, time, and time management. So these are different personality types that might affect occupational choices. And so lastly, in the world of work, there are developmental tracks from school to work. The first track is the forgotten half, where 50% of adolescents don't go to college and tend to hold many part-time jobs and have a difficult time establishing what kind of occupational path they want to take. The others take 4 pathways. 35% go the 4-year degree and career. 17.5% do associates or vocational degrees. 28% don't have any kind of stable career. And 19% have a stable career but no college.